Early morning in the small town of Chateaubel, famous for its cobblestone streets and cozy family-run eateries, carried a gentle chill of spring. Sunlight streamed through the window of Le Petit Gourmet, a charming restaurant where Sophie Laurent, a 28-year-old waitress, began her workday. With her brown hair neatly tied up and a gentle smile, Sophie always offered customers a sense of warmth and comfort, despite the heavy burdens she carried in her heart. Sophie was the sole provider for her small family. Her father passed away in an accident when she was just 10 years old, leaving her mother, Elise Laurent, to raise her alone. Years of hardship had taken a toll on Elise's health, and now she was battling a chronic illness, entirely dependent on Sophie's care. Each day after her shifts at the restaurant, Sophie rushed back to their small, aging house on the outskirts of town to care for her mother, cooking, taking her to medical appointments, and staying up late to tend to her during painful episodes. Despite her struggles, Sophie never let her sorrow show. She believed that maintaining her optimism would give her mother the strength to keep fighting. Yet there were nights when she sat quietly at the small kitchen table, staring at the growing stack of bills, feeling overwhelmed and unsure of how to cope. One early weekday afternoon, as the restaurant bustled with customers, Sophie noticed a new face. A man dressed simply, with slightly tousled hair and contemplative eyes, entered and chose a table by the window overlooking the lively cobblestone street. Sophie approached him with her usual professional smile. "Good afternoon. What would you like today?" she asked gently. The man looked up and responded with a faint smile. "Thank you. I'll take a moment to browse the menu." Sophie nodded and returned to her work, unaware that the man, Marc Delacroix, was not just an ordinary customer. Marc was the owner of a renowned restaurant chain, visiting incognito to observe firsthand. Recent complaints about the service at Le Petit Gourmet had prompted him to investigate in disguise. Little did he know that from the very first moment, Sophie Laurent caught his attention, not for her appearance, but for her exceptional dedication and rare sincerity. That afternoon marked the beginning of an intertwined fate between Sophie and Marc, setting the stage for a story of hope and resilience. Welcome to Soul Stories. Today we bring you a heartwarming tale. Let us know which city you're tuning in from around the world. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to catch more meaningful stories. Chapter 1. The Fateful Encounter. Afternoons at Le Petit Gourmet were always the busiest. Customers flocked to the quaint restaurant in search of a warm meal amidst the serene atmosphere of Chateaubel. The small eatery exuded coziness, with hand-painted artwork on the walls and a soft golden glow from vintage lamps. Marc Delacroix entered the restaurant dressed simply in a gray sweater and faded jeans. Pushing open the creaky wooden door, he took in the surroundings. The tables were slightly disorganized. Potted plants on the windowsill had wilted, and the floor bore visible scuff marks. This wasn't the standard he expected from a restaurant under his chain. Choosing a table near the window, Marc sat down, his contemplative gaze scanning the activity around him. He had decided to go undercover to investigate recent customer complaints personally. Being a perfectionist, Marc couldn't tolerate negligence, especially in establishments bearing his name. Amid his observations, Marc's attention was drawn to a young waitress moving briskly between tables. She had a slender build, her brown hair neatly tied in a bun, and a warm smile that seemed to never leave her face. Her name tag read, Sophie Laurent. Unlike many employees he had encountered before, Sophie stood out. Despite the crowded restaurant, she remained calm, attending to each table with care and ensuring no customer waited too long. Sophie approached Marc's table, carrying a menu. "Good afternoon. What would you like today?" Her voice was gentle and sincere. Marc looked up and met her bright, kind eyes. He smiled faintly. "I'll take a moment to look at the menu, thank you." Sophie nodded and left the menu before moving on to serve another table. As she continued working, Marc observed her every move, how she deftly poured water, engaged customers in polite conversation, and tidied up tables. Though beads of sweat glistened on her forehead, her smile remained steadfast, a resilient mask. But not everything about the restaurant was pleasant. Marc quickly identified a glaring issue. Bruno, the manager, seemed to be a source of stress for the staff. From behind the counter, Bruno barked orders in a sharp, irritable tone. "Sophie, hurry up! Table 5 still doesn't have their drinks. How long are you going to keep the customers waiting? Sophie lowered her head, murmuring a quiet apology before rushing to the kitchen. Mark noticed the fatigue in her eyes, but she maintained a professional demeanor, shielding the customers from the tension she endured. When Sophie returned to Mark's table with the lemonade he had ordered, she offered a small smile. Sorry for the wait. It's quite busy today. Mark shook his head. It's all right. I can see how hard you're working. Sophie smiled faintly. It's just a normal day at work. No matter how hectic it gets, I try my best to make customers feel at ease. Mark's curiosity deepened. Your job seems challenging. How long have you been working here? Sophie hesitated briefly but found comfort in Mark's genuine interest. I've been here for nearly 2 years. It's not always easy, but I need this job. Mark raised an eyebrow, intrigued. What keeps you going in such a difficult environment? Sophie paused, a shadow of sadness crossing her face. My mother is seriously ill. I'm the only one taking care of her. This job doesn't pay much, but it helps cover our living expenses and her medical bills. Sophie's words stirred something in Mark. He hadn't expected the warm smile she wore to conceal the weight of such responsibility. You're incredibly strong, Mark said softly. I hope things will get better for you. Sophie simply gave a faint smile and excused herself to attend to another table, leaving Mark with his thoughts. He realized that, amidst the restaurant's managerial shortcomings, Sophie was the one shining light in the heavy atmosphere. Her sincerity, dedication, and resilience captivated him. As Sophie continued her work, Mark resolved to find a way not only to improve the restaurant, but also to support this remarkable woman. Yet how could he help without revealing his true identity? It was a question he would ponder in the days to come. Chapter 2. Discovery and Understanding. In the days following their first encounter, Mark Delacroix began frequenting Le Petit Gourmet. He chose a familiar small corner near the window, where he could observe everything discreetly. Dressed in simple clothing with an unassuming demeanor, no one in the restaurant, least of all Sophie, realized he was the owner of the restaurant chain. Mark paid close attention to every detail. Sophie's nimble hands clearing tables, her resilient smile that masked the fatigue in her eyes, and the evident injustice from Bruno, the manager who often berated her. Bruno's harsh scolding and sharp remarks were hard for Mark to witness, but what impressed him even more was Sophie's ability to remain composed, enduring everything without letting it affect the customers. One evening, as the restaurant quieted down, Mark noticed Sophie cleaning the last few tables, her exhaustion visible, but her actions still meticulous. After finishing her duties, she left the restaurant, not heading home, but instead walking toward a nearby pharmacy. Curious, Mark followed her at a respectful distance. Through the glass of the pharmacy, Mark saw Sophie speaking to the pharmacist, clutching a long prescription in her hand. She carefully counted out her money, her movements deliberate as she handed it over. Watching her, Mark's heart grew heavy. Her earnings from the restaurant likely barely covered her expenses, much of it going toward her mother's medical care. That night, Mark couldn't stop thinking about Sophie. He realized she wasn't just working to make ends meet, but bore a far greater responsibility, caring for her ailing mother. Her perseverance and dedication left him deeply moved. The next day, Mark returned to the restaurant with a newfound determination. While he couldn't immediately change Sophie's circumstances, he could support her in small ways. He began leaving generous tips, sometimes double the bill's amount. Occasionally, he scribbled short notes on napkins. You're doing great. Keep it up. Or, thank you for your dedication. It made my day so much better. At first, Sophie didn't know where the kind words were coming from, but they warmed her heart during long, stressful shifts. However, the mounting pressures of work and her responsibilities at home began to take their toll on Sophie. Bruno, the manager, never missed an opportunity to criticize her. One particularly busy evening, Sophie forgot to bring drinks to a table due to the rush. From the cashier's counter, Bruno's voice boomed across the room. Sophie, are you planning on serving those customers, or should I hire someone who can actually do the job? They've been waiting for over 10 minutes. For a moment, the entire restaurant froze. All eyes turned to Sophie, who stood motionless, her face pale. From his usual seat, Mark could no longer stay silent. He stood and approached Bruno, his voice calm but filled with restrained anger. "Mr. Bruno, do you think it's appropriate to treat your staff this way? Sophie is doing her best, and it's clear to every customer here." Bruno turned to Mark, his expression laced with irritation. "And who are you to interfere? This is how I manage the restaurant. If you don't like it, you're welcome to eat elsewhere." Mark suppressed his rising anger. "As a customer, I have every right to speak up when I see someone being treated unfairly. Sophie doesn't deserve this." Sophie, trying to maintain her composure, stepped between them. She looked at Mark, her eyes filled with worry. "Please don't get involved," she said softly. "I appreciate your kindness, but I can't afford to lose this job. My mother depends on me, and I can't let things get worse." Her words struck Mark like a blade. No matter how much he wanted to help her, he realized he needed to tread carefully to avoid making her situation more difficult. After the incident, Sophie seemed to withdraw, avoiding Mark's gaze whenever she served his table. She was afraid that his attention might attract more scrutiny from Bruno, but Mark wasn't deterred. He decided to find another way to support her without jeopardizing her job. One evening, Mark saw Sophie again on her way home. She carried a large bag of medication, her posture weary but determined. From a distance, Mark watched her walk toward a small, rundown apartment building. His heart sank. He resolved not only to help Sophie overcome her immediate struggles, but to give her a chance at a better life. In the following days, Mark continued to visit the restaurant, leaving behind notes of encouragement. But he was also quietly formulating a larger plan. He wanted to help Sophie rise above her current circumstances, but the challenge was figuring out how to do so without revealing his true identity. Sophie's extraordinary resilience and warm heart deserved more than just admiration. They deserved action. Mark was determined to be the one to make a difference in her life. Chapter 3: An Unexpected Offer. The days following Mark witnessing Sophie being berated by Bruno left him restless. He had seen enough. Bruno's mistreatment of staff, his lack of leadership, and above all, Sophie's relentless struggles. Mark decided it was time to act, not just for the restaurant's sake, but for Sophie's future as well. One late afternoon, after the restaurant had quieted down, Mark waited patiently for Sophie to finish her shift. From his usual table, he watched her tired figure clean the last of the tables with meticulous care. When Sophie placed her tray on the counter, Mark approached her, his voice warm but serious. "Sophie, could I have a word with you in private?" Sophie looked at him in surprise but nodded, as he had always been a kind and encouraging customer. She followed him to the patio, where the air was calm and the noise from the restaurant faded into the background. "What's this about?" Sophie asked, attempting a smile despite the fatigue etched on her face. Mark hesitated for a moment, choosing his words carefully. Then he looked her straight in the eye and said, "Sophie, I'm not just a regular customer. I'm the owner of this restaurant chain, including Le Petit Gourmet." Sophie froze, her eyes wide with shock. She stared at Mark, struggling to process what she had just heard. You're the owner? Why didn't you tell anyone?" Mark offered a gentle smile. "I came undercover to understand what's really happening here. I wanted to see things from a customer's perspective. And during this time, I've realized that you're not just an exceptional employee. You're the person holding this place together." Sophie was at a loss for words, her gaze dropping to the ground as she tried to steady her thoughts. Mark continued, "Bruno is not fit to manage this restaurant. The way he treats you and the other staff is unacceptable. I've decided it's time for a change, and the first step is removing him." Sophie gasped. "Fire Bruno? But you don't need to do that because of me. I can endure it. I just need to keep this job for my mother's sake." Mark interrupted her gently but firmly. "Sophie, you shouldn't have to endure such unfair treatment. You're talented and dedicated, and you deserve to work in an environment where your efforts are appreciated." He paused before delivering his next words, his gaze steady. "And I want you to become the manager of this restaurant." The offer left Sophie utterly stunned. She looked at Mark, her voice faltering. You want me to be the manager? But I'm just a waitress. I've never managed anything in my life." "That's precisely why I think you should," Mark said, his tone calm but encouraging. "I've been observing you for a while now. The way you work, how you treat customers, and the grace with which you handle challenges, all of it shows that you have the qualities of a great leader. With your dedication, I believe you can do this better than anyone else. Sophie shook her head, her eyes filled with worry. But I can't. My mother needs me. She relies on me for everything, and I can't give more time to work. Mark nodded understandingly, as though he had anticipated her hesitation. I know, Sophie. That's why I want to help. I've already contacted a reputable hospital in the city, and I can arrange for your mother to receive proper care. You won't have to worry about her health anymore. Sophie stared at him, her emotions overwhelming her. You would really do that? But why? Why are you doing so much for me? Mark's voice softened, filled with sincerity. Because I believe in you, Sophie. I don't just want to help you through your current struggles. I want to give you a chance to transform your life. I know this isn't easy, but I'm certain you can rise to the challenge. Sophie remained silent for a long moment, grappling with the magnitude of Mark's offer. It sounded like a dream, but it came with a responsibility so great that she wasn't sure she could shoulder it. Lowering her gaze, she murmured, I need time to think about this. It's such a big decision. Mark smiled reassuringly, showing no sign of impatience. Of course. Take all the time you need. I don't want to pressure you, but remember, I'll support you in any way I can. Sophie looked at him, gratitude shining in her eyes. Thank you, Mark. I don't know what to say. Mark placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, his expression encouraging. Just think it over. I believe in you, Sophie. That evening, Sophie returned home, her mind racing with thoughts about Mark's proposal. Her mother, Elise, sat on a worn armchair, her frail hands resting on her lap. Sophie knelt beside her, taking her hand as conflicting emotions swirled within her. Maman, Sophie began softly, I've been given an incredible opportunity, but I don't know if I can do it. Elise smiled weakly, her trembling hand brushing Sophie's hair. My dear, you've always been strong. If you believe you can, then you will. Don't let fear hold you back. Her mother's words felt like a beacon of light, cutting through Sophie's doubt. She knew she needed to think carefully, not just for herself, but for her mother, the person who had always been her anchor and inspiration. That night, Sophie lay awake, replaying Mark's words and her mother's encouragement in her mind. Could she take on this new role? Was this her chance to change not only her own life, but also her mother's? Sophie knew that whatever decision she made, it would mark a pivotal moment in her life. Chapter 4. A Decision to Change. A week passed, and Sophie continued her daily routine of juggling long hours at work with caring for her mother each night. Despite her best efforts, Mark's offer lingered in her mind. Each time she saw her frail mother resting in the old armchair of their modest home, Sophie wondered if taking the opportunity might be the right step for both of them. One evening, as Sophie gently fed her mother spoonfuls of warm soup, Elise looked at her daughter with tender eyes. My dear, she said softly, her voice weak but resolute, I know you're worried, but you can't live your whole life in fear. This is a chance for you to change things, not just for yourself, but for us. You deserve a better life. Sophie paused, her eyes brimming with tears. But Mama, if I take this role, I'll have less time to take care of you. I'm afraid you'll feel lonely. Elise managed a faint smile, her frail hands brushing against Sophie's. I won't be lonely, Sophie. Remember Mark said he would arrange for me to be cared for at a good hospital? If you accept, I'll be happy knowing you're moving forward in life. Her mother's words felt like a beacon cutting through the fog of doubt in Sophie's heart. That night, she sat silently by the window, watching the moonlight reflect off the cobblestone streets. She realized that to move forward, she would have to confront her fears and step out of her comfort zone. The next morning, Sophie arrived at the restaurant earlier than usual. When Mark entered, she approached his table with a calm but determined voice. Mark, I've thought long and hard. I'll take on the role of manager. Mark looked up, his face breaking into a radiant smile. Sophie, I'm so glad to hear that. I knew you'd make this decision. But there's one condition, Sophie added. I want to make sure the work environment here truly changes, not just for me, but for everyone. That's exactly my goal. Mark assured her, his eyes reflecting sincerity. We'll make these changes together. From the very first day in her new role, Mark began supporting Sophie wholeheartedly. He arranged a series of training sessions to help her develop managerial skills, covering everything from task delegation and conflict resolution to creating a positive work environment. At first, Sophie felt overwhelmed, but with Mark's patient guidance, her confidence grew steadily. One day, Mark called a meeting for all the staff at Le Petit Gourmet. During the gathering, he announced major changes to the restaurant, including Bruno's dismissal and Sophie's promotion to manager. Some staff members appeared uncertain, but as Sophie spoke, their attitudes shifted. Everyone, Sophie began, her voice slightly trembling but filled with sincerity. I know this is a big change, but I want us to work together to make this a place where everyone feels respected and valued. I'm not perfect, but I promise to listen and do my best. Her words were met with applause from the team, many of whom had endured Bruno's harsh management for years. Slowly but surely, the atmosphere at the restaurant began to feel lighter and more positive. In the weeks that followed, Mark continued to assist Sophie in transforming the restaurant. Together, they revamped the decor, hired additional staff, and improved workflow processes. Sophie focused particularly on building strong relationships with her team. She made time to listen to their ideas, encouraged their contributions, and held regular meetings to address concerns. One afternoon during a busy lunch rush, Sophie noticed a new employee, Julie, struggling to manage a difficult customer. Sophie stepped in with a calm and reassuring demeanor, helping Julie handle the situation and boosting her confidence. This small act not only helped Julie feel supported, but also showed the other employees that Sophie genuinely cared about their well-being. Meanwhile, Sophie and Mark's relationship grew closer. Late nights spent working together turned into heartfelt conversations about their goals and aspirations for the restaurant. One evening, after wrapping up for the day, Mark invited Sophie for a walk outside. You've transformed this place in just a few weeks. I must say I'm impressed, Mark said, his tone filled with admiration. Oh, it's nothing, Sophie replied with a shy smile. I'm just doing what needed to be done. But I have to thank you for believing in me. Mark stopped walking, turning to face her. Sophie, you're not just a great manager. You're an incredible person. I've never met anyone with a heart as kind and a spirit as strong as yours. Sophie felt her cheeks flush, caught off guard by Mark's sincere words. While she didn't say it aloud, she knew that her gratitude toward Mark had slowly deepened into something more. As they worked and grew closer, both Sophie and Mark realized that their connection extended beyond their shared efforts at the restaurant. Sophie, who had once doubted her abilities, began to see herself as a capable leader, valued and respected. Mark, who had initially come to solve a business problem, found unexpected joy in supporting and sharing moments with Sophie. The changes at the restaurant didn't just improve operations, they reignited hope in Sophie's heart and inspired those around her. Through their shared journey, Sophie and Mark discovered something far greater than professional success, a profound bond that promised to transform both their lives forever. Chapter 5. Love and Hope. The restaurant transformed into a vibrant and welcoming space, shedding its former tense atmosphere. Employees felt valued, and customers frequently returned for the friendly ambiance Sophie and her team had created. Mark watched Sophie's progress with pride, admiring her determination and leadership. One evening after the restaurant had closed, Mark invited Sophie for a walk along the riverbank. The shimmering lights reflected on the calm water created a tranquil atmosphere, and the cool evening air brought a sense of serenity. You look radiant tonight, Mark began, breaking the comfortable silence between them. Sophie smiled softly, her cheeks flushing. It's all thanks to your support. I couldn't have done this without you. No, Sophie. It's all your hard work, Mark said, stopping to look at her directly. You haven't just changed this restaurant, you've changed my life. Sophie looked at him, startled by his words, her eyes betraying her confusion. Mark stepped closer, his voice warm and sincere. Sophie, you have no idea how special you are. From the moment I met you, I saw someone extraordinary, a strong, compassionate woman who gives her all for others. I've realized that I can't imagine my life without you. Sophie stood still, her heart pounding, overwhelmed with both emotion and surprise. Mark, I've never thought about love. My responsibilities with my mother and the restaurant take up all my time. I don't know if I can. Mark smiled gently. I understand, Sophie, but you don't have to carry everything alone. I want to share your burdens and be by your side. Together, we can face anything. Mark slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Opening it, he revealed a simple yet elegant ring, its delicate stone catching the warm glow of the streetlights. Sophie Laurent, will you marry me? I want to build a life of happiness with you. A life where we don't just thrive, but also bring hope and joy to others. Tears welled up in Sophie's eyes as she struggled to find words. Her heart swelled with emotion as she whispered, Mark, yes, I'll marry you. With trembling hands, Mark slid the ring onto her finger. Their eyes met, and in that moment, they both knew this was the beginning of a new chapter. Beneath the night sky, they shared a tender kiss, sealing their love and their promise to build a future together. After their wedding, Sophie and Mark continued to develop the restaurant. It became a renowned dining spot in the region and a model workplace where everyone felt respected. Inspired by her own experiences, Sophie proposed holding regular charity events to provide free meals for those in need. It was her way of giving back and honoring the kindness she had received in her life. Mark, with his business acumen, supported Sophie in expanding the project. Together, they secured partnerships with local organizations, offering not only meals, but also job opportunities to the less fortunate. The restaurant became a beacon of hope and community spirit. Elise, Sophie's mother, improved significantly under the care Mark had arranged at a reputable hospital. She could now join Sophie and Mark for cozy family dinners, sharing in the joy they had created. One evening, as the family sat around the table, Elise looked at her daughter with pride. My dear, she said softly, your father would be so proud of you. Sophie squeezed her mother's hand gently. I only wish for you to stay healthy, Mama, so we can share these moments for many years to come. One sunny weekend, Sophie and Mark stood outside the restaurant with Elise, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of gold and orange. The three of them stood quietly, soaking in the tranquility of the moment. Sophie, Mark said, his eyes bright with optimism, we've come so far, and I believe the road ahead will be even more wonderful. Sophie nodded, a serene smile gracing her lips. I believe that too, and I know that with you, I don't have to fear anything anymore. They held hands, their warmth and connection a silent promise that, no matter what the future held, they would face it together. This story is a testament to the power of love, compassion, and resilience in overcoming adversity. Sophie's journey shows us that, with perseverance and determination, challenges can be transformed into opportunities. Mark's sincere love and unwavering belief in Sophie not only rekindled her hope, but also opened doors to a life of fulfillment and purpose. True happiness lies not just in personal success, but in sharing and uplifting others. Moreover, faith in oneself and seizing opportunities are the keys to creating a brighter future. Thank you for following this story. Please rate it from 1 to 5 stars and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our Soul Stories channel. Your support is the motivation for us to continue bringing more great stories.